Welcome dear participants. In the prior modules, we have looked at the interpretations of our hands and fingers. In the current module, we would look at the interpretations which are communicated by our feet and by the positioning of legs in our formal communication with others. The interpretations of various aspects of our kinetic signals are rather generalized, even though many of these perceptions have got a scientific backing now. Researchers have told us that our legs and feet are more honest in communication in comparison to other body parts of us. This finding was first of all put forward by Paul Ekman and William Friesen, who suggested that when a person lies, then it is normally revealed by the lower part of his body, and the lower part of the liar's body communicates more signals in comparison to the upper body portions. This idea first of all was put forward by Paul Ekman and William Friesen, who suggested that if a person is lying, then the maximum kinetic signals are received from the legs and feet in comparison to other body parts which are in the upper portion of the body. This finding was later on supported by various other researchers, and particularly I would like to quote the findings by Stalter. Stalter has commented that in comparison to our legs and feet, our facial expressions as well as our hands and even our fingers have a better and more conscious control. Partially it is there because during most of our interactions, people tend to focus on our face and sometimes on our hands. Our brain transmits the signals of freezing or running. These instincts are visible in our legs. For example, if we are following a person on a rather treacherous path, then if the other person who is walking in front of us stumbles or stops, we would immediately stop without consciously thinking about the reason behind it. So, these instinctive signals are communicated with the help of our legs and the positioning of the feet. In professional situations also, in dyadic and in interpersonal situations, we find that these perceptions are dominantly present and shared by cross-cultural situations. As our facial expressions reveal our feelings, our legs and position of the feet also communicates our feelings. And Stalter has pointed out that certain feelings and emotional attitudes are better communicated with the help of our positioning of legs and feet. And the list includes anxiety, anticipation, welcome, exclusion, interest, as well as retreat. I would like to refer to a very interesting article by Karen Stolzno. In this 2017 article, she has analyzed 6 different leg positions which were sent to her by a reader. We find that the analysis is pretty interesting and also very close to our common perceptions. The person who has opted for the position named as A suggests an attitude of wishful thinking. The person would prefer that these problems can be wished away. The second person with the position B is rather a dreamer who happens to have a vivid imagination. The person who has opted for the third position C is rather picky and choosy in terms of personal choices. For example, the type of shoes, the type of clothes, the perfumes one wears, etc. The person would be rather choosy about it. The person who has opted for the fourth position, named as D, would find it difficult to accept criticism in an open and constructive manner. Normally, we find that people who opt for this sitting posture jump to their defense immediately instead of listening to the criticism, and are always in a hurry either to defend their actions or to try to wriggle out of that position by changing the conversation patterns. The person who has opted for the E position comes across as a person who is very stubborn and persistent, and at the same time is not hurried. He or she would be a person who has invested a lot of time in self improvement, in looking as better as possible, in performing as better as possible, performing in as better a way as possible. And therefore, the person is not a hurried person. The person would wait and put in a lot of effort. However, at the same time, if it is supported by the rest of the clustering of our kinesic postures, it can also indicate a certain sense of insecurity and lack of self confidence. Even though we understand that while we sit, then we normally are looking for a position which is comfortable to us, and at the same time we are conscious not to violate the social and cultural norms. However, the sitting positions also communicate certain messages which are likely to be motivated by our unconscious desires and perceptions. We can, for instance, look at the open and closed seating situations. A person who is sitting with open legs normally comes across as a person who has opted for a relaxed position and is comfortable in a given situation. On the other hand, a person who has opted for a crossed leg position comes across as a closed and reticent person. At the same time, the tension which is exhibited through the positioning of the knees, etc., also discloses a lot about the anxiety level a person might be feeling. Often it may happen that when we opt for a particular posture, we ourselves may not be aware of transmitting these messages, but the other person who is looking at us is not impervious to these subtle suggestions. Let us look at some commonly found postures and what do they signify in professional circumstances. A very common posture which we come across is that of a crossed leg situation. Interpretations of this commonly come across position depend on whether the legs are outstretched and relaxed, or they are crossed at the ankles, or they are crossed at the knees, or how much tension is perceptible in their knees or in the ankle crosses. If the legs are outstretched and the ankles are loosely crossed, it usually signals that the person is at ease and has opted for a comfortable position. In the workplace, we often find people opting for this posture because it happens to be a comfortable one. However, if the cross is rigid, it communicates the tension and anxiety which a person is facing at that time. The tension and anxiety which is visible in these crosses can be either protective or negative, but nonetheless it exhibits a desire to shield oneself from a particular person or to shield oneself in a given situation. In the second photograph, we find that the leg cross is duplicated by the arms cross. It shows that the individual is not only defensive but is also emotionally withdrawn and therefore is almost unreceptive to surroundings. During professional interactions, we find that people who have opted for this position do not openly participate in the dialogue. The sentences they use are rather short and crypt, and they are always in a hurry to reject the proposals because often they tend to overlook the details, and therefore it is advisable to relax the atmosphere so that the people can uncross the body postures and be more receptive in their attitudes. In addition to suggesting a relaxed position as well as a position which suggests a tension, the normal interpretation of the foot lock or the ankle lock is that the person displays a defensive attitude. It has been supported by Ellen Pease also, who has commented that in his more than 3 decades of interviewing and selling to people, it has been noted that when an interviewee locks his ankle, he is mentally biting his lips. Researchers tell us almost in a conclusive fashion that it is the tension in the lock which suggest whether a person is relatively relaxed or is holding back a negative emotion. The negative emotion may not necessarily be anger or a strong dislike towards other. It may also be a mild feeling of uncertainty or nervousness or a normal situation of apprehension and fear which people normally face at the time of interviews, etc. However, if the feet are also withdrawn under the chair, it suggests that the person has a withdrawn attitude. Most of us tend to unconsciously lock our ankles and feet whenever we are interacting with a person who is either senior to us, or we find ourselves in a situation when we feel that we have to be rather on the defensive attitude. In the ankle lock, we also find certain gender differences. Amongst men, we find that the ankle lock is often combined with clenched fists which are resting on the knees, and often the hands are tightly gripping either the knees or arms of the chair depending on the tension which a person is feeling in a given situation. On the other hand, we find that the women normally opt for a slightly different posture even though their ankles are locked. They come across as more restful, more formal. However, the communication of the ankle lock are similar despite these gender differences of opting for certain postures. In this slide, we would look at two postures which are also seen in the workplace. The first is known as the European leg cross, in which we find that the person is sitting comfortably, draping one leg over the other. It is always the dominant leg which crosses over the other. Normally, people opt for a relaxed position, a leaned back posture which indicates that the person is in control, has a positive association with the place, and at the same time is rather cultured and wants to come across as an intellectual person. In general, wants to indicate that the person is inoffensive. In comparison to that, the next posture, which is known as the numerical 4 posture, suggests that the person is argumentative and opinionated. This person has a certain lack of respect for the opinions of other people, also has certain stubbornness and would not be open to the suggestions of other people, and would persistently hold his or her own opinion despite having seen certain shortcomings in it. Numerical 4 is normally the posture which people are advised to avoid during formal situations. In this slide, we can look at two photographs which are the variations of numerical 4 posture, and they are also relatively common, particularly in semi-formal dialogues, even at the workplace. In these figure 4 leg clamp situations, we find that both hands are clamped on the leg and one leg is resting horizontally over the other. This person comes across as a stubborn and tough-minded person, a person who is not in a mood to negotiate, yet in the given situation feels strangely relaxed and wants to stay in this situation for a little while. Since the clamping of the leg with our hands suggests that we want to stay in this position for a certain time, most of the dialogue is not going to serve much purpose. During any sales related presentations or in any interaction, if the person has opted for this type of an attitude, most of what we are going to say would further encourage the person to clamp his or her attitude in a forceful manner, and the no would soon be verbalized. And therefore, it becomes important to think of a certain other strategy, to think for certain type of a diversion, so that this clamped position can be undone and the person can be relaxed in body language, and very soon we may feel that the relaxed body posture would also be sending certain signals to the brain, and a different approach can be taken up in this situation. Certain other positions which we can take up is the leg twine and the parallel legs, as well as the connotations if a person is stroking his or her leg. The leg twine is normally opted by those women who are relatively shy. Amongst men, it is normally not seen in the workplace. Parallel legs is something which is normally seen in women, but it is also seen in men also. The parallel leg position is normally related with a feminine posture, but nonetheless it can be found in men also. Amongst women, it is considered to be a feminine and positive posture. This is a posture which women in the grooming classes are taught to opt for. It also suggests a certain level of confidence and attractiveness. However, in men, it is normally associated with something effeminate. During the dialogue, if a person is stroking his leg while sitting, it normally is considered to be a pacifying action. If it is repeatedly done, it showcases the tension of a person. However, in women, it is often associated with a flirtatious gesture and it should be avoided. The first is the Maharaja posture or the Lincolnesque posture, which suggests a confidence as well as a dominant nature. It is a confident way of sitting on a particular chair where arms are resting peacefully without any tension and feet are also planted firmly on the floor. If we find two people opting for the same position and facing each other, the dialogue is confident and yet it moves in a positive direction. The second posture is known as the standby posture. It is taken up by a person who has a positive attitude, has agreed to whatever is being discussed and wants to move on with it. This is the posture of a person who is willing to accept the proposal. For example, where do I sign now to move on further? If this is also associated with a gesture of absent-mindedly stroking the chin, then it is an indication that the person has agreed to the proposal and the sales can be pitched in. Certain other postures which are seen in the semi-formal situations, for example in the workplace where the colleagues or team members have been working for a very long time together. The spread and stretched out legs while sitting suggest the non-acceptance as a response to something which has happened earlier. It is also a posture which suggests a total relaxation. However, during discussions, if this posture has been taken up, it suggests that the person is not accepting something which has happened earlier. It depends on how far the upper part of the body is leaned back, and this leaning back suggests the distance the person is trying to keep to some event or to some person. If we look at the second posture, in which a person is sitting with a leg over the arm of the chair, we normally may feel that the person is looking as a relaxed, open and informal one. On the other hand, we feel that the actual emotions are just the opposite. The person shows not only a noted indifference, but also a definite hostility to other people. It also communicates a dominant position or a superior position, and therefore it may be difficult to relate to this person who is sitting in this posture. The third posture can be taken up as an extension of the second one. It is neither informal nor cooperative. In fact, the back of the chair has been taken up as a shield in a group situation. The shield may be targeting the other people or the topic which is under discussion, and it also retains the connotations of the second posture. An understanding of the positive and negative connotations of posture helps us to avoid a negative communication with the help of our postures, and at the same time decode the true intentions of the other person in a group interaction. The way we position our feet also reflects our feelings towards other people to whom we happen to be talking to at the moment. If we hold an open and positive attitude towards other people, our feet, our head and torso points to the same person in a single clue. And this position gives us an understanding of the attitude of other people towards us and vice versa. On the other hand, if the stance is negative or there is certain diffidence in the attitude, it is also perceptible because the feet and torso would be positioned in different directions. This idea is interestingly shown in the given video.
Feet language. Feet are the most honest part of a person because we're not always aware of what our feet are doing. Ankles hooked around the chair legs shows the person is nervous or trying to control him or herself. I find myself doing this at dinner a lot. If a person has the heel of one foot on the ground with the toes pointed to the sky, he or she is happy or admiring themselves. This usually happens in a mirror. If a foot is tapping and there is no music, that means the person is nervous or wants to go. Go to restaurants much? A person sitting with legs stretched out and ankles crossed is feeling relaxed or confident. When a person has their legs crossed and foot shaking, they are bored. Bored. There's no other way to describe it. If the feet get jiggly and do a little dance, the person is happy or excited. Or both. If someone's body is turned towards you, but one or both feet are not, the person doesn't want to be with you. One or both feet point at something the person is interested in. So when their foot is pointed away from you, you might want to look where their foot is pointed, because most likely it's in the general vicinity of what they're interested in or where they want to go. If one foot starts twitching or kicking, it shows the person is unhappy. If the feet are set wide apart, the person is feeling strong and sometimes also angry. Rawr. I am Groot. Never mind. People usually cross a leg towards someone they like or are comfortable with. And it also works the opposite way. If you're sitting beside somebody that you're not comfortable with, it's pretty likely you're going to cross your leg away from them. And then there's the issue where you're sitting between two people that you are comfortable with and you have to cross your leg away from one of them. That's awkward, but only awkward for you because they probably don't know what your body language is saying. Or maybe that's just me. Yeah, it's probably just me. And finally, when two people are walking together and their steps are matched, going right, left, at the same time, they want to talk to each other. And they're probably friends. Although that's not technically a rule, but they want to talk to each other.
If our sitting posture reveals a lot about our attitudes, the way we stand also indicates several aspects of our attitudes and behavior. Legs apart is rightly interpreted as a signal of dominance. It is resolutely stable and immovable, indicates a person who is standing the ground, etc. It is common in sports people. It is also commonly visible in security forces, and it is an impersonation of the toughness. The person wants to convey a mental toughness to the other person. A person who opts for a straddling stance is an extension of the legs apart, dominant stand. The straddling stance communicates an added coldness and belligerence in the person's attitude, and normally this is a position which is never opted for in any professional situation. The parallel stance or at attention is a formal position which shows a neutral attitude without any commitment either to stay or to go. Normally we come across this standing position in those people who are subordinate, who hold a security related position, amongst junior officers, young school children who are waiting to receive a direction from a senior person. It indicates a certain hesitation on the part of the person. The person has a diffidence and cannot openly voice an opinion, but nonetheless it also communicates a willing and immediate obedience on the part of this person. The buttress stance is slightly different. In this stand, we place most of our weight on a straight supporting leg, allowing the other leg to serve as a buttress. People adopting this stand sometimes come across as comfortably standing people. However, it suggests that the person is not exactly interested in what is happening around him or her, rather has a desire to move away on the first available opportunity. Standing with both feet on the ground is a neutral yet powerful standing position. In this photograph, we find that a person is standing with a standard gap between the legs, which are firmly planted on the floor. This is a stable and focused position. It does not show any belligerence. It also does not showcase any non-verbal noise, and therefore it is normally treated as a formal and focused position, the best one to initiate our interactions in any given professional situation. In comparison to this, the foot forward position suggests that we are about to walk away, and it is normally adopted by people towards the end of a rather long and tough day. If it is opted in a group position, we tend to point our lead foot towards the most interesting person or the most attractive person in the group. It shows our leanings towards that individual in a group position. The scissors stance, which is also known as the bent blade stance, is obviously a defensive and negative posture. It does have a certain rigidity. However, the extent of rigidity is displayed on the basis of the rigidity of arms as well as the facial expressions. If they are closed and rigid, then the extent of rigidity is great. At the same time, the immobility of this posture suggests a certain commitment, because the person who has opted for this stance would sit through the conversation, would not leave the negotiations in the middle and walk away. Sometimes it is taken up as an act of submission. It does not convey any impatience. The person would stay there, wants to stay there also. However, it suggests a certain level of insecurity either towards the person or towards the situation at hand. So, though this is a negative position indicating a defensiveness and insecurity of a person, it is not necessarily a hurried posture, and if the other person is patient, we feel that the negativity can be taken away in this position through dialogue. Sometimes we also come across what is known as fidgeting feet. Fidgeting feet are opposite of the relaxed feet position, and they suggest the hurried attitude of a person to move away from this position, to leave this situation and flee. While standing, a person may repeatedly tap a foot to indicate this impatience. Similarly, while standing or sitting, tapping with one's foot symbolizes impatience, and at the same time it may also suggest a certain dissatisfaction with what is being said. Sometimes it may also mean that the person who is tapping with his or her foot is interested in passing on a repartee or to add something to the dialogue, and in this situation the person has to be given an opportunity to participate and speak. A variation of the fidgeting foot in professional situation is known as teetering feet, feet which are rather unsteadily balanced and the person is continually swaying back and forth. This action demonstrates that the person is ill at ease and can communicate a cluster of negative things. For example, the person may be thinking of something else, would like to drop the issue or move on, or the person thinks that the speaker is not convincing enough. The teetering feet should not be taken up as necessarily a negative body posture, because the person basically has a positive attitude towards the speaker as well as towards the position. The interactant must try to find out the reasons of the hurry, reasons why the feet are teetering, why the unsteadiness is there, to find out more about the situation and resolve it in a satisfactory manner. Stomping feet suggest our hostility. Normally, it is considered to be a childish behavior, and in adults, it is a reflection of an extreme anger or an extreme disappointment, which should always be avoided. Let us look at what is known as 45-degree open position. In this open position, we find that the behavior of three people is to be viewed. If two people are already engrossed in the dialogue and a third person wants to participate in it, the two people who are already in the dialogue have to move in such a position that the third person feels invited. If the two people who had originally been in the dialogue continue with a closed attitude and do not open their position of the feet or legs even a small bit, the other person feels totally as an outsider and the participation becomes impossible in this position. The closed and open body positions indicate our desire to interact openly with other people. As we begin to feel more comfortable in a group or in a diet and we get to know others, we move through a series of movements, and then instead of opting for a defensive position with crossed arms and legs as is displayed in the first photograph, we can gradually move to a more relaxed and open position as is shown in the second one. If we look at the body signal gestures and postures in the first photograph, we find that they exhibit a sense of uncertainty towards each other. On the other hand, in the second photograph, it is relatively an open acceptance of the other, which is displayed through the gestures and postures. An analysis of legs and feet movements has been done in this video during a networking event. We can guess from the position of legs and feet of their mental situations while they are talking to someone or before participation in a conversation midway.
Topic: legs and feet. If you want to leg up on your competition, pay attention to what's going on below the knees. It's a little known fact that the feet are two of the most expressive parts of our bodies. Let's see what we can discover about what our feet and legs communicate.
So I was really hoping that I'd get a chance to
This
talk to
person may
whoever
look
you talked
engaged
about.
from the waist up, but in reality, he's wishing he were heading in the direction of his feet, out the door. His feet are a dead
But, you know,
giveaway.
you kind of
Let's take a look at these folks at a networking event. Which one do you think would rather be someplace else? You got it. The one with his foot pointing to the door. Here, it's pretty clear these two people really like each other because their legs and feet are pointing towards each other. The same holds true in a standing position. In fact, when you see two people engaged in a conversation like these two here, it would be wise not to try to interrupt. You may end up embarrassing yourself. But don't despair. If you want to join a conversation already in progress, there are two things you can do. First, find a twosome or threesome that looks open to, including another person. How can you tell if they're open? You got it, by the position of their legs and feet. The second way to increase your chance of being included in a conversation is to be a copycat. When people converse with people they like, they'll mirror or copy the other person's body language. We mirror people to show them that we are like-minded and therefore safe to hang out with. So a great way to fit into an ongoing conversation is to mirror the people already conversing. There's a good chance they'll sense your kinship and open up to include you. Now, I hope you have enough information to go out and put your best foot forward.
Let us look at the knee points and what exactly do they signify about our attitudes. In the knee point A and B, which also remind us of the numerical 4 posture, we find that an attitude of rejecting the other person is shown. If the knee points in the direction of the other person, as it has been displayed in the first photograph A, it is a direct rejection of the other person or his statement. In B, we find that it is the sole of the foot which is moved in the direction of the other person. In some cultures, it is seen as an extremely insulting one. In all cultures, nonetheless, it is a posture of rejection and it is considered to be a highly negative one. It immediately stops the open flow of conversation and is detrimental in any dialogue. It is the position of our toes which suggests a positivity or negativity of our attitude. Toes pointing upward suggest that the person is in a good mood or is likely to hear something which is positive. For example, if a picnic is to be announced in a class, the most enthusiastic students would immediately move their toes upward. If we happen to look at a person who is talking on a phone and then the toes are pointing upward, we can almost be sure that it is a good news or an enjoyable conversation at least. In contrast, the pigeon toes, when the toes are pointing inward, shows a certain meekness and it signals our willingness to be led by the other dominant partner during our dialogues. Pigeon toes make the body appear smaller, forcing it into a less threatening profile. It also shows our submissiveness and our meekness and our willingness to be dominated by other people. It also happens to be one of those gestures which are used as stock expressions of emotions in movies. In this video, we can see that the body language expert Carol Kinsey-Goman has analyzed what one's feet tell in different situations.
Control their body language, they focus mostly on their facial expressions and hand and arm gestures. And since the legs and feet go often unrehearsed, it's also where the truth is almost always found. Let me give you a couple of examples. If, for instance, you're talking to a coworker whose upper body is faced toward you, but whose feet and legs have turned and angled toward the door, realize that conversation is over. Her feet are telling you she wants to leave. Foot positions are revealing even if someone is seated and their legs are crossed. For instance, if I'm sitting next to you and you're over here, my leg is crossed with my toe pointed toward you, that's a signal that I'm interested and engaged in what you're saying. But if you notice that I cross my legs so that my top toe is pointed away from you, then you've probably lost my interest. Feet and legs outstretched means that someone feels comfortable or secure. But when ankles lock and withdraw, or even wrap around the legs of a chair, that person feels insecure or left out. Tapping, bouncing, or jiggling feet are what professional poker players refer to as happy feet. In poker, it's a high confidence tell, a signal that the player feels he has a strong hand. In business negotiations, there's a similar signal. If you notice someone's feet bouncing or you see the jiggling in the shoulders that's a reaction from that bounce, you can be pretty much assured that that person feels that he's got a good bargaining position.
Another video which I would recommend can be accessed on the given link. It has not been included in my discussion, nonetheless it is recommended to the participants. I would close my discussion of what our feet and the position of our legs suggest in any professional interaction. In my next module, I would take up para language for discussions. Thank you.